Skipster is the guest management platform used by top event teams for everything from guest lists to seating charts and online invitations. If you're looking for next-generation event software that helps deliver perfect guest experiences, head over to Skipster's website. It's Skipster, ZKIPSTER.com to try a free event.
Are you a follower? Okay, so we're gonna be
Welcome to Gather Geeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Welcome to Gather Geeks. David is away this week, so I'll be introducing our guest. We spoke with Nicolas Graf, who is Associate Dean of the Jonathan Tisch Center at New York University, about higher education and the future of event management and hospitality. The university is making a big play in innovation with new initiatives to incubate businesses and launch startups, a new master's program in event management that begins this fall, and changes to and the coming expansion of its signature hospitality conference. Let's listen. Welcome to Gather Geeks.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here to have a conversation about higher education and the future of event management and hospitality and all of the disciplines that you cover, how they're coming together, what you're offering students, and we're going to dig into this on a global level. So let's just start with going over some of the interesting things that you are doing at NYU. Let's start with the High Hub. Tell us what High Hub is and what it consists of.
So High Hub stands for Hospitality Innovation Hub. And what it is, it's a space that we are currently building at our campus here in New York, which will have different functions. The first function is about experiential learning, so bringing really true experiential learning to our students for any kind of subjects that they're studying, whether it's marketing, revenue management, event management, or anything like that. What they will be asked to do is actually to do it first, using technology, using prototypes, using simulations, using serious games and things of the sort. So they will first be tasked to do the thing, then reflect on it, and then the faculty will bring in some of the theories or frameworks that can bring some level of conceptualization on that stuff. So that's one of the things, and you think about, how do you best learn how to organize an event? Well, you do it first, and then you learn from the mistakes, and then you try to bring a better framework to organize the next event in a more professional way. So that's one component of the hub. Second component of the hub is two programs for entrepreneurs. One, which will be for mostly later stage startups, open to every startup, very much a model that accelerator programs around the world are doing, thinking about Techstar and others. So we're going to do that in partnership with two companies that are, I can't say the names right now, but two companies that are active in this, in our field, in our space, hospitality, travel, and tourism. So they will be co-partners in investing into the startups, but also in covering some of the operating expenses of the programs. It's going to be a 4-month program for later stage startups. We're going to have a second one, which is an incubator program, open to NYU students at an earlier stage, so more kind of at the business plan development stage.
Okay, so the startup is for existing businesses, not necessarily students. Is that correct?
The accelerator program.
The accelerator, yes.
Can be for existing smaller businesses that needs to be accelerated.
Got it. And then the incubator is the part for students.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Well, however, one thing that you did mention earlier, and I wanted to sort of clarify this, is that an event actually could be considered a startup, as opposed to just a technology play or something like that, or a restaurant or things like that.
Absolutely.
So that's a new piece of information.
Absolutely, and I'm telling you, I'm living in a startup mode right now as we're planning on a new event. So yes, absolutely, an event can be one, and the other piece of the hub is we're going to provide anyone in the hub, students or founders and entrepreneurs, we're going to provide them with the ability to prototype stuff and to study whether it's an event. How do you want to throw an event? You make some decisions about how the event will function. How do you know ahead of time that it's going to work or yield the intended outcome? So you can prototype that, you can study that, you can use virtual reality, you can use augmented reality, you can use the normal reality, I would say. So we're going to offer that space as well for entrepreneurs and other businesses. So yes, an event can be a startup.
So thinking about the conception and the decision to go ahead and create this High Hub, what is the state of innovation that you see in the industry? Why did you feel there was space for this space?
The common theme across the industry for the past, and I'm talking about really hospitality in a holistic way, which includes travel, tourism, event management, to a degree, shopping and retail, to a degree, museum and art. The common theme has been about disruption. Now, there has been a focus on generally digital innovation, but I think it goes well beyond that. So I think innovation is everywhere because the traditional boundaries of businesses have been totally reshaped by the new generations and by the new way of consuming things. And so today it's all about the experience, and the experience is boundaryless in many ways. So it doesn't stop. If you take a hotel, the experience doesn't start at the check-in and it doesn't stop at the checkout. I went to Hong Kong a few weeks ago and I had one of the worst experiences in my life and had nothing to do with the Grand Hyatt where I stayed. Although I would say that my perception of the Grand Hyatt was affected by the taxi driver that took me from the airport to the hotel. I think the guy was drunk. He was driving under the rain. It was a very rainy day. He was driving 100 miles an hour. It was just crazy. I tried to buckle up everywhere and so it was just crazy. So the experience is throughout the journey. And so as this is being transformed today, innovation is needed pretty much everywhere.
Well, you were also saying the experience is all the journey, but you are going down to the dreaming state of the experience. Talk a little bit about that, because it really is when you think about wanting to do something.
Well, I had that experience. I had my brother came to visit me last summer, and we went up on the Northeast. And on the way back, we stopped Providence, and then one person said, "Oh, Providence is the capital of food." And I was like, "Really?" And I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Well, it's all over Instagram, and you have pictures of it all over Instagram." And I said, "Well, does that make you want to go to Providence?" I said, "Oh, sure, of course." And we went there a couple of times to experience the food. So the way we live our life today, driven by social media, Instagram is part of the travel and tourism sector. It's part of the experience economy. They make us dream about taking a selfie and, somewhere. There's a famous street in Paris now that's, kind of super crowded because everybody wants to go to Paris, to that street, to take a picture of themselves. It's been, and so the dream phase is part of it. And it's constant. It's pretty much.
So it's dreaming and discovery.
It's dreaming and discovery, and then it's sharing.
If everybody's taking the same picture, are you really discovering anything?
Well, but you're discovering that you may want to go there if you're consuming the media. If you're consuming it, you're discovering, oh my God, I never even thought about going there.
Well, you're discovering it, and I think the way people do it is they dream, they discover, they experience, and there are a couple of steps along the way, and at the end they share.
And they tell people.
and they make other people dream about it. And it's a constant phenomenon that's happening constant. It's called ubiquity. It's everywhere, constantly, and all the time. And so it's part of the dreaming phase is clearly part of it. And the way we make people dream is also through the experience. As you experience things, that marks the way you're going to share it and the way you're going to dream about other experiences in the future. It sets expectations.
So going back to HiHub and the experiential learning, so you're going to have students use the example of students actually planning an event. Is the idea to then push it forward to plan an event like an event has never been planned before? Or is this just the practical experiences of a student planning an event so that when they get out in the workforce, they know how to plan an event?
But I think there are different levels of skills and competencies we developed in our students. The first one is really the kind of comprehension and application of the basics. So they still need to know how to do the basics. Now, they need to know how to do the basics on the latest technology, on the latest best practices. So we're going to bring the best practices in the classroom, and the first level of learning is going to be about, understanding and mastering the best practices. But then once you do that, then you have another level of competency. After, there are different taxonomies of learning that exist out there. Bloom is probably the most famous one. I simplify it in 3 stages, because too many stages otherwise, and I can't remember them. So the second one I see is really about critically evaluating the best practices. If I have to choose between 2 different best practices, can I do that in a critical way, based upon my unique context, which of the best practices is the best one for me? So that's critical evaluation is the next step. And then the third step is about innovation. It's about creativity and innovation. And so once you've kind of critically evaluated all of the best practices, then you figure, you're like, wait a minute, there's something that's not working. There are pain points that are not addressed by the best practices in this given context. And creatively, I can come up with a new solution that I will maybe develop in a business. And so that's where, if you think about an event, so yes, they need to learn and master current best practices. They need to be able to critically evaluate these best practices. But maybe, that model of experiential learning will yield with, new ideas on, hey, you know what? This, in fact, we talked about it. Everything is an event. And in fact, I'm going to do a new business in managing people's daily events, in one way or another. And so that innovation is also going to happen there. And it follows, I believe, the same methodology, which is let's do it, let's think about it, let's conceptualize, and let's do it again.
I wanted you to be able to describe the new event management degree program, because that kicks off this fall and is something I know that we've reported on in BizBash, but this is now where it's coming to reality. So tell us about the program, what the need was, why you felt the industry needed a graduate level program in event management.
Well, I have a background in the US, but also in Europe and in the rest of the world. Graduate degrees in event management in the rest of the world is not necessarily all that new. As you all know, the event management space from a career standpoint, career opportunity standpoint is huge. And I think US universities just came to realize how big of a sector this was, because it's not just about an event in a hotel or wedding or things like that. Events are done everywhere, constantly. You have event manager at the university. When we talked to the leadership of the university and we said, well, you know what? Do you know how many people actually work in event management at the university? They said, no, nobody works in it. And then they started to think about all of the events we were putting together. And, commencement is an event. We go to Yankee Stadium. I said, do you need specific skills to do that? Of course you do. You have the Justin Trudeau who came as a speaker last year. You need security with that. You need to do. It's a complex thing to plan, contract, prepare, and then execute. And then you have the post execution, kind of feedback and how you learn about it. So I think it's simply people came to realize how big of a sector it was, how specialized skills can be, and as this. From a more personal standpoint, I think the complexity and the competitiveness that events can, complexity is increasing, and it can bring more competitive advantage to many different businesses if they are done well. And the way events are evolving probably require today, graduate level skills and education. So that's how it all started. Now, the way we've put the program together is really going to to the industry and people who are doing that and living that on a daily basis and said, what are the critical needs? And based on the critical needs, from production, from contracting, from budgeting, from marketing, all the critical needs, we have them in the core part of the curriculum. And then we have all of the electives for those who, need more specialized, whether it's a specialized type of event, like mega events. I'm putting together, talking about the Olympic Games, that it needs some specialized skills. That we offer in our elective curriculum, or you say, no, I'm an event manager for, talking about weddings. Weddings are not, not going away. In fact, people seem to be having more than one wedding a life. So, you need some other specialized skills for it and experiential events and all that. So all of these more specialized skills are in the elective curriculum. It's a 36 credit. We also made it, in a way as efficient as possible for students so that if they really want to take it full time, they could graduate in a year.
And what are the requirements to wanting to get this master's program?
So there's a requirement is number one is you need to have an undergraduate degree, a bachelor degree from an accredited institution, whether it's in the US or accredited in other countries. So that's what you need. We value then different things. So then there's not a right or wrong thing. We value students. If you graduated from your undergraduate degree, say 2 years ago, you've been out working only for 2 years, we're going to give some value to your undergraduate GPA, right? We want to make sure that you were a good student. Now we're going to look into the details of the courses that, you took and the grades you had. Now, if you had a bad grade in yoga, because there are courses in yoga, so it's not going to impact us too much. But if you had bad grades
Glad to know that one.
Right? If you had some bad grades in anything that's people related, or planning related and these kinds of things, or even creativity related, then that's going to have more of a negative effect.
And are this you're welcoming your first class this fall?
Yep.
So are they mostly people who are changing careers to go into event planning and want the credential, or are they people who are in the field and want to increase their skills and knowledge?
Well, first of all, we are very happy. We still have a couple of weeks to go for admitting students and onboarding them, but it's been very successful for a new program that's been announced not too long ago. We're going to have a full class, which, anywhere between 20 and 30 students, which is quite a success and shows, to me, is an evidence of the need for people to have that kind of education in that specific field. So that's number one. Amongst these 20 to 30, I would say about half are career changers. And some of them, coming from pretty good careers, but in very boring jobs. And we have them that also come to our other degree programs in hospitality and travel and tourism, that people who want, I've been sitting at a desk for the past 10 years. I'm making good money, but I don't have a real lifestyle. And I want to have a job that can give me that lifestyle. And so we have some of that. Others that have always been passionate about, throwing events. They really enjoy that, and they never thought about that as a career. And so they're working different fields. So they're not necessarily bored, but it's simply we're offering something they've always dreamed of. And then we have another pool of students who are what we consider career climbers, or they had a little bit of event management in their undergraduate degree. They may be working in the field, and they want to up their game, and they want to become, senior manager for events or something like that. Or some of them wants to create their own event management companies.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that you mentioned earlier to me, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes about the conference, is that there is an incentive now for coming. So tell us a little. When I first met you, the first thing we talked about was that you announced this incredible sort of feature for NYU hospitality schools. So
yes, no, we've been very fortunate to have our NYU International Hospitality Investment Conference with all of the sponsors that have funded the conference and funded the Tisch Center. And with their support, we've been able to create an endowment that we think we use to reinvest in the future of the industry. And to do that, what we're doing is we've announced a $10,000 scholarship that it will be given automatically to every new grad student of the program, whether it's on hospitality, event, or travel and tourism. Every one of them will get automatically $10,000. And then, of course, we have another pool of money for need and merit-based, which will allow us to give probably close to $1.5 million of scholarship next year.
So anybody that really wants to be in this industry and qualifies, you're going to pull down all the barriers.
We're trying to pull down two barriers. We are trying to pull down, which essentially is one. We're trying to ensure that the return on education is sufficient. We're trying to ensure, and we know that some of the early jobs that people can get after graduation may not necessarily pay a sufficient amount to pay back all of the student debt or student loans that they could potentially take if they had to fund the program themselves. And so we're trying to lower that barrier. The other barrier we're trying to lower is we're trying to allow students to accelerate their study. So instead of having too many students that have to work part-time to finance their study, we're trying to reduce that burden on them so that they can accelerate their study and they can graduate faster and get that new job, faster. So that's really what we're trying to do.
Fabulous.
Condense it and be able to focus on their studies rather than dividing their attention is what you're saying.
And, having an incentive, when you talk to students and you say, well, how did you choose your internship, for instance? Well, first thing I avoided all of the non-paid internships, regardless of their interests, and I focused on the one that were paying. I say, no, that's not the point of an internship. And if an internship is part of a program, it's because you've got to maximize the learning of it, not maximize the income from it. And so we're trying to ensure that by reducing the cost of education, we're providing more opportunity for students to concentrate on what matters, which is basically their education and their learning.
Building a memorable experience for your guest means planning every detail right. Skipster is the guest management platform designed to help you create the perfect experience, from impressive online invitations to seamless check-in at the door. Get started at Skipster, spelled ZKIPSTER.com, for a free test event.
So you are not only NYU isn't only an educator of students, you also practice what you preach with your own events. And we mentioned the 41st edition of the NYU Hospitality and Investment Conference. It's part of BizBash's top 100 events that we recognize it as being vital to the hospitality industry. But that's always changing. Tell us how your approach to that and some of the ways in which you changed it this year to make it a more effective conference.
Well, it's a conference that is, we surveyed a lot of people in the industry and asked them, how would you consider this conference? What would be something that if you had to present it to someone else, what words would you? And one of the common word was it's the Davos conference of hospitality and investment. And we're very proud of it. Number one, because I'm Swiss, so Davos is is special to me. But the other piece is it shows the kind of perception people have of the level and the seriousness of the conference. That being said, we've seen over the years although we've been increasing our attendees numbers and all of that, we've seen slowly growing disinterest into some of the content and into some of the functions and things we were organizing. And when we surveyed the attendees and talked to people and thought about the world as the world's changing, we realized that we were not sufficiently experiential in different ways. And we probably were a little too classic sometimes. And we had not made enough changes to keep people interested. So people seek novelty today.
They do. What was the impetus for this study? Do you do this every year, or did you have a sense that things needed to change, and so you sought to reach out?
No, looking at, there are things that never change, maybe, but it's, for most businesses, never changing is not necessarily a good sign. And I came to realize last year when I joined NYU that the conference had not really changed in its format, in the way it's been managed. So the content had changed, but the way it had been managed and the format had not changed in many, many, many years. And I consider that as a threat or a threat to the conference. So we hired a consultant to do the survey and the study and the market research and feed us with ideas. And then we came up with our own ideas and we made a couple of changes and they've been all very successful. So we're very happy with it.
Well, let's talk about some of those changes. Start with your pre-conference marketing strategy. What changed?
So what changed is, and in a way it was intentional and not intentional. What changed is, that's sometimes how good things happen. It's called the emerging strategy type of way of thinking. And so what happened is we were a little late in confirming some of the speakers. And what we used to do in the past, we used to wait until we had all of the big, top speakers confirmed to send everything immediately early on with the objective of driving, registration. If I put all of the big names like early on, everybody will want to register quickly. And there may be some truth in that. But this year we were like, we were a little late in confirming some of the top speakers. And so I said, let's start, let's, give them a little bit. And as we continue, we'll give them a little bit more and a little bit. The people who will register, 5 months ahead are the ones who will register anyway. Let's try to build expectations and some kind of people waiting for who's going to be the next one, some excitement. And that was somehow by design, but also by the fact that we didn't have the confirmations. And so the last one we really held that one to that one was really intentional when we had Bob De Niro confirmed as a speaker. And I thought that was a, kind of very attractive speaker for many people. And I said, let's wait until like 3 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of time, the last minute really, so that we end with a big boom. And we convinced the ones who were kind of still hesitating. And so we did that, and it worked really well. We had record attendance, a level of attendance we had never seen in 41 years. We did a couple of other changes. We changed sponsorship levels. We added different levels, recognizing that, the industry we're serving is consolidating. So we have bigger and bigger companies. And I figured that, the bigger the company, the more they're willing to pay maybe. And it worked. So we had and we were able to recognize different needs also. Some companies want to use a year to make a special announcement or to celebrate, like Hilton came out of our top sponsor, because they're celebrating their 100-year anniversary, which is unique. So you need to provide people with choice, even on the sponsor side. Mm-hmm.
You also made a change in how your sponsors, those who are activating on site, interacted with guests or where they were. Tell us about that.
Right. So we used to have exhibitors in a specific room together with, the coffee break and some snacks. And I realized that it wasn't really working as much as we hoped. And a lot of the exhibitors were a little bored to death. On the second day, there was no traffic. And I know that, if you want to make sure exhibitors are visited, then you need to bring traffic. And if you cannot bring traffic with coffee and nuts, then maybe you need to bring the exhibitors where traffic is. And so we took all of the exhibitors up in the different floors of the hotel where traffic has to be, because people have to go through the elevator, they have to go through this to go to the different sessions, etc. So there is natural traffic there. And so we created that, which in fact added another layer to it, added some kind of a new feeling and a new experience for everyone. Some people never knew that there was an exhibitor area, and all of a sudden, oh, that's new, and so it created a new level of energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It depends on your venue having the ability to accommodate you, right?
Absolutely. We had the Marriott Marquis. It's a big hotel with all of the advantages and sometimes disadvantages of it. They're doing a great job in many ways. But absolutely, you need the venue. You need to make sure that you study and understand the advantage and disadvantage of the venue itself. It's not rocket science, but it needs to be careful and understand that the built environment participates in creating the experience.
So I have a question in terms of the making of these changes. It's a 40-year-old conference. You come in with fresh eyes. You looked at the year before. You had the bold initiatives to make changes where a lot of people would say, okay, it's working. Let's be a little bit more timid about this. And we're seeing that the C-level people are embracing events more. Do you see that kind of thing happening all over the place where a new boss comes in, the new CEO comes in, and they're looking at events more critically and are suggesting things Do you suggest that as part of a leadership role too?
I think people in today's world cannot, if you want to succeed, you need to improve constantly. You cannot simply, and that's true everywhere, across the board. The world's changing so fast in predictable and very much unpredictable ways. So unless you're constantly questioning what has been working, and I think many people, even those that have been CEOs for 10 years, maybe the first 2 or 3 years, they came in with the fresh eyes and they made the changes because of the fresh eyes, but then they probably quickly realized that they need to keep the eyes fresh constantly because, you have to try new things because the world is going to change in predictable and unpredictable ways.
But is the CEO now the event planner in chief from the strategic perspective now because it's such an important vehicle for them?
Well, I would say so in many ways. When Chris Nassetta was on stage from Hilton, the CEO of Hilton, one of the questions was, what keeps you up at night? And there's always that kind of a question. And he said he was obsessing about his company's culture. And so creating a culture in a way is very much like managing events and creating something that is experienced by people and felt. A lot of things in corporate culture is about setting the norms, creating stories that people can, and creating examples of what behaviors are expected. How do we expect people to behave and what values they have? And events are a very strong vehicle for that. So yes, I think it's a big priority, and it's a big priority as well because it's a big business. So there's the culture side of it, the fun side of it, and then there is the business side of it, and it's growing much bigger. I mean, our main supporter, Jonathan Tisch and Loews Hotels, their new developments are very much connected to events and sports venues, and because they see it as a tremendous opportunity to expand the business and yet do it in a way that creates a certain culture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you wrapped up the 41st edition of this New York City-based event, and now you are going to expand it. Tell it, and this is sort of breaking news, right? You haven't talked much about this. Tell us where it's going next.
So we're going against probably the short-term way of doing business in the U.S. We're going to China. We're going to Shanghai, and we think we think the relationships between the two largest economies in the world must be positive. Must be there must be certain things that need to be dealt with, but we believe that the long-term relationship is critical to peace and prosperity in the globe. So we are building that bridge by going to Shanghai. NYU decided a couple of years to create its own degree granting campus. We have 3 degree granting campuses and another 13 global sites where we own campuses. We have Abu Dhabi and we have Shanghai. And the belief was we need to facilitate the free flow of ideas, free flow of people. And going there was not easy. And you think about Abu Dhabi in the Middle East and you think about Shanghai, it was a bold decision at the time. And so we are going there as well, essentially for the same reasons. Now, the other reasons is, and so we will be organizing it at the Grand Hyatt in Shanghai in Pudong, which is an interesting building. It's the architecture is phenomenal, and it has an interesting story because it shares some of the features of the Marriott Marquis where we're organizing it here. And again, that's why the built environment is important in creating a story, in creating something that grounds the event. So the lobby is on an elevated floor. It's on the 8th floor at the Marriott Marquis. It's on the 30-something floor at Grand Hyatt. Second piece is once you get into the lobby, you have a huge atrium going throughout all of the guest room floors, and both have that same feature. So I think there's some interesting story to tell between the two. The other piece, the other reason really is China is a huge market. It's a continent like the US. So for hospitality, travel, and event, it's gigantic. And it's a place where significant innovations happen. The first entirely automated hotel was built there a couple of months ago by Alibaba. So there's a lot of innovation. So we're going to try to be more, to focus that conference is going to be similar to the one in New York, but we will have a greater focus on technology, innovation, and the overall experience economy. We're going to bring in some retail speakers and luxury brand speakers as well to share, other perspective on that. And the last thing we are trying to do is bring more educational content. And so we're going to have a second day, which will be mostly educational with different certificate programs that we'll be offering.
Can you go into who attends both of those conferences to make it clear?
So in the US, we have probably around 70% is North American type of attendees, 30% rest of the world, and it's kind of scattered all around the world. All of the, I would say, attendees are mostly senior executives in major hotel groups, investment in the investment community, investment bankers, lawyers, brokerage firms, consultants, anybody that's around investing in the business of hospitality, which include hotels, now it includes restaurants, now it includes vacation rentals, and it includes a lot of the technology powering it and distributing it. What we see is a growing interest from people in retail. Lots of the Hudson Yards development, for instance, is a totally, and I was in Hong Kong, I visited the Victoria Dockside, where you have the new Rosewood with a retail store, with a serviced apartment. So all of this is kind of, coming together. And so we have a growing interest from these kinds of people. In Shanghai, my best, guess right now is 70% to 60% is going to be from mainland China, and a similar representation of type of attendees. Excuse me. And probably 30% from the rest of Asia Pacific, and maybe 10% from the US.
Mm-hmm. And tell us again, when does this conference take place?
So it's April 20 to 22nd of next year.
Of 2020.
So it starts on a Monday evening with a reception, and it goes on to the Tuesday and Wednesday. And we did a lot of research to figure out what the best dates were in China. And it's different. We start in New York, we start on Sunday night. Because people, when they travel, they come on Sunday. In China, apparently people don't want to attend anything on a Sunday. It's for them. And so they would rather travel on the Monday, get the opening reception on the Monday night, and then stay 2 days during the week. So there are some differences that we had to acknowledge.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So I wanted to ask, because, the NYU obviously is in the business of creating knowledge. You have faculty that research things, and I'd love for you to tell us what the areas of research that are vital or most interesting right now, or ones that you see coming down that your faculty are going to be addressing.
So there are a couple of there are a lot of very interesting research that my faculty is doing, but I have faculty in finance, economics, et cetera, et cetera. I have all of the different areas. But I think if I had to list maybe the top three most interesting one is some of the research that we will be doing on how to leverage the built environment to enhance experiences. So that's one that is going to be, it used to be called, as we were talking about, servicescape, and how to use, lightings and smell and air quality and the design and all this to enhance different sorts of experiences. And so that it's at the, at the intersection of architecture, design, consumer science. So that's one of the big area of study that we're going to work on. Then there's another one which is on sustainability and tourism. And so one of my faculty members is leading an effort in putting together an over-tourism index, which will hopefully guide better policymaking in how to deal with infrastructure projects, tourism. Take cruise liners, when they go in an island, they all of a sudden you get like 4,000 people all at once. They stay during the day, they don't stay overnight. How is the infrastructure prepared to face that kind of over-tourism? So he's going to work on that index. And I think it's a major question as travel and tourism globally keeps growing, over world GDP every year. It's close to 5% a year. and it's not going to stop anytime soon. But how do we deal with that? So that's the second piece. And maybe the third one I would say is about diversity and inclusion. And we recently did one with, I think it was with MPI, if I recall correctly. I think I do recall correctly, on, diversity and inclusion in meetings. How do you ensure that? And it's not just about ensuring it for gender and ethnicity, but it's ensuring it for people with disabilities, for instance. So how do you ensure that you build an event that is supporting diversity, that is facilitating inclusion and ensuring equity and a sense of belonging, right? So that's the third major area that I see.
What do you see that's coming up that you want to do it's not quite there, like is food justice on the horizon? What are the things that you think next period of time you would focus on?
I think in the world in which we live, we're social justice, you mentioned. How do you ensure that you provide opportunities, economic opportunities, in a world that will see a number of jobs disappear through automation? I think we have a wonderful opportunity in travel and tourism and all of the experience-related sectors to empower people and give them access and opportunity to wonderful careers. We just need to find the best model to make that happen and use that, education and business, use that and create the needed programs to make it truly happen. I think that's going to be my biggest focus in the years to come, is how do we ensure that we leverage the opportunity we have in our fields to fix a problem that the society globally is facing and will continue to face in the years to come. And, talking about lawyers, a lot of people are thinking that lawyers are going to lose their jobs because a lot of the things that they're doing today will be automated by technology. And if that's the case, what is the lawyer going to do? Well-paying jobs? Highly educated people, very smart. What is it that you're going to make them do? And I think in our field we have a growing sector where I don't think will be replaced by technology anytime soon. I think technology will enhance their ability to create even better experiences. But how do we create the pathways to make it happen? And that's for the lawyer, but that's for the immigrants, the migrants. Because that's not going to go away anytime soon. It's a global problem. It's not just in the US. You've seen migration being a huge problem between, Africa and Europe. You see migration being a problem also within countries where you have urbanization is about migration. And how do we make sure that the migrants get access and opportunity to the right pathway? So that's really, and at affordable costs.
How do you show leadership in that area? I mean, you're dealing with a bureaucracy, and it's your personal wish to want to do this. How do you get from the personal wish to making it happen in an academic environment?
Right. You need to do a lot of convincing. And I found, one thing is extremely powerful is if you find the donors willing to financially support it. That tends to open a lot of doors and cut through some of the bureaucracy of big universities pretty quickly.
Your strategy, I see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I give you an example of one of the things I've been working on and I'm still seeking funding, which is, Israel has a booming tourism economy. Tourism is booming. I was in Tel Aviv last year and they're building hotels and they cannot staff them properly. And yet you have a problem within Israel is that the Arab women populations tend to be the least employed and the least educated. And it's known, it's documented. And so you say, wait a minute, but how can we bridge these two things, which also will facilitate the discussion between, Arabs and Jews in a country that, needs more discussion than problems. So we're putting together some programs that, if we find some funding to launch them, will be mostly targeting the Arab woman to bring them back into the workforce, into hospitality and travel.
Wow.
Through certificates. And so these are ways we can act as and how do I get to through bureaucracy for that? I think it's doing a good thing. Mm-hmm. It's taking the discussion between Israel and Palestinian from a different angle. And campuses in the US have been agitated by the BDS movements, the boycott, divest, and sanction movement. And I think that discussion needs to occur in a more constructive way. So I've used that to actually push my projects further, and I think it's doing good.
It's brilliant. I love it.
Well, if anyone wants to get in touch with you about financing that project, or beyond that,
call in right from our Gather Geeks audience. If
you never know.
Never know.
Our listeners are amazing, and wants to learn more about the degree program, or just get in touch with you. Can you tell our listeners how to do that?
Well, so we have a wonderful website, a new website, which we launched a month ago. So the main website is nyu.edu. The school website is sps.nyu.edu. The other way of doing it, you go on LinkedIn, you type in my name, Nicolas Graf, invite me as a connection. I tend to accept them unless you have a very strange background, and then be in touch. I'll respond.
Thank you, Nicolas, and we will be following developments on all of these fronts that we talked about. One of my first beats as a journalist was higher education. So I find this new thinking about education and research fascinating. And I'm also glad that Nicolas could speak to the financial aid aspect, because student debt can be overwhelming. And as our listeners know, first jobs in hospitality and events likely will not have huge salaries. To learn more about NYU's new master's degree, as well as developments at other universities, you can read a past BizBash story, What You Need to Know About New Degrees in Event Management. Go to bizbash.com and search NYU Master's Program to find that, or you can click the link in our show notes. And that's our show for today. Thanks to our podcast team, producer Dave Nelson, the editorial director of the podcast, Claire Hoffman, and our VP of Production and Client Services, Rebecca Pappas. We will be back next week, and until then, gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks, or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on.